So, good morning and hello everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about you, and I just want to see a show of hands from those of you who have heard Metrology 101 or something equivalent to understanding how water moves through the atmosphere. Is that something that had been part of your curriculum of your previous academic career? Yeah, so can I see, did everyone hear this? Metrology 101, I call it. Do you have a basic understanding of how water vapor or how water works? So there are few people. What about how sediment moves through the landscape? Have you heard about geomorphology and landscape evolution? Is that something that you have heard in the past? Please show me your hands. Okay. What about working with time series data? Have you been exposed to analyzing time series data before? Okay. And what about using Python for time series analysis? Have you been doing plots, making figures with Python? Have you done this before? Okay, and has anyone used R, MATLAB, or something along those lines for analyzing their data? Okay, okay.
So we start slow.
That's fine. We are going to take it very slow, and we are trying to explain as much as possible on the way while we move forward. The resources that we provide for you on GitHub, as Taylor pointed out before, they all contain much more detail than what we will be explaining. So for those of you who have been exposed to Python or who have used Jupyter Labs in the past, they can go through those resources in their own pace and find out and dive in those things a little deeper. For those of you who are completely overwhelmed, don't get stressed out. You can just follow along and see what we are doing. We will be explaining the steps, and you can go back later to that Jupyter Lab on GitHub and follow through it in your own time at your own pace. That's why we are also doing the recording that will provide you with the option of looking at that and listening to this later on and going through those steps at your own pace, pausing the video, continuing, and all of these things. Okay, having said that, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a very, very, very quick introduction to global navigation satellite systems, or GPS in the old school language, and how these can be used for water vapor remote sensing. There is no way that I can cover all of the details in 15 minutes. We offer courses that take 6 months to cover those, so there is no way that we can provide the level of detail that is necessary to understand every step. But I would like to give you some ideas of why we have been setting up those stations in the Trishuli River and what the underlying science is. So when we are looking at GPS, I'm going to move this a little, or you're faster with mouse. Yeah. So you here use the name GNSS, which stands for Global Navigation Satellite System. That is a modern word for GPS. The old school language is GPS, and GPS, Global Positioning System, is only the US system, the system that was originally put up by the Department of Defense of the United States. But nowadays we have a GLONASS, that's a Russian system. We have a European system that is called Galileo. And we have a Chinese system that is called Bodo. And we have local systems in Japan and India. In fact, we probably could use the Indian ones here in Nepal that are local navigation satellite system. So when we are using the term GNSS, we just mean all satellites. And all of your phones, I know that all you have mobile phones, and I'm certain that you have used Google Maps before or any other navigation software. They usually can track all different systems. So all the modern phones, they can track the different systems. And what we most often do with GNSS is used for navigation, meaning, you give in a location where you would like to go, the satellites do a triangulation, you know where you are, and then you get the route of where you're going to. That's the standard navigation application of GNSS systems. What we do is we turn this around and we keep a station stable. We are not moving the station. We have a perfectly mounted antenna that is not moving, and therefore, when we see variations in the signal, it is not due to movement, it is due to the changes in the atmosphere. So you can envision that the satellites that are roughly in 22,000 kilometers height, the signal is traveling through the atmosphere to the antenna, and if the antenna remains fixed, it is recording the changes of the atmosphere. So this is a very, very simplified way of how we look at a GNSS signal. Those satellites are in 20,000 somewhat kilometers. The signal is traveling through the ionosphere. In the ionosphere, the signal can be accelerated or deaccelerated. So whenever you have a big solar storm, the GNSS data is showing this variation. And then we have the troposphere, which is the lowermost part of the atmosphere, the 10, 15 kilometers, the lowest most 10, 15 kilometers, and they contain most of the water vapor. So that's just the way our atmosphere is set up, that we have the lowest amount of, the highest amount of water vapor in the troposphere. And this is exactly what we can sense. We can have a fixed GPS receiver, so it really cannot move at all. So we have them bolted and mounted in a really fixed place. And so when we look at the satellite signals, we can see how the satellite signals change while the satellite travels over our station. And the more water vapor we have in the troposphere, the more refracted or the more bent our signal gets. So the higher the water vapor content, the more bent our signal, or the more delayed our signal. Which means that if we are during the monsoon season, we have a high delay. In the winter season, such as now, we have a lower delay, and we can map that very, very accurately down to the millimeter, and we can map it every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes. So we have a very, very high resolution image, if you want, of the atmosphere. We are not measuring rain directly, we are measuring precipitable water, or integrated water vapor, as you call it. That is the amount of moisture that is in the air, and if it comes to a rainstorm, that rain will fall out. In other words, the higher the precipitable water amount, the higher the potential for large rainstorms. So all of those big mesoscale convective events that cause the heavy rainfalls and can cause flooding, they are associated with high moisture amounts in the atmosphere. And I'm going in a little bit more detail, and I just wanted to talk about that signal that we are measuring. Maybe I go back one slide and give you one more piece of information. So in order to measure this delay, that refraction, that bending of the signal, we need to have not only one signal, we need to have two signals. And we need to have two signals, and those two signals have a different frequency, meaning that one with a lower frequency gets bent less than the signal with a higher frequency. So we look at the difference of those two frequencies, and that gives us the delay. So the antenna that I'm talking about is much more precise than what we have in our mobile phones. So the mobile phones, they only record one frequency and have a very simple antenna. The devices that we use, they have an antenna that is slightly larger, also more expensive, and it allows us to record multiple frequencies. There are up to 5 frequencies that the modern GPS or GNSS systems sent out. We only use 2, and most often only 3 are being used for research purposes. Some of the other signals are commercial purposes for millimeter scale navigation, but we are not going there. So when we can calculate that delay, the delay in the troposphere, and we call it tropospheric delay, and that contains information about air pressure, temperature, and the water vapor content. We know the air pressure because we have other sensors that tell us what the air pressure is like, and we know what the temperature is like. So we can solve, or we know those 2 other components, and we can solve for what is the water vapor content. And that's an unknown in the atmosphere. Climate models provide you with the same piece of information, but it's always nice to have an actual measurement of the water vapor content, especially at high temporal resolution. And just a few words about the units that we are using. So that's for those of you who have the Metrology 101 background. We often talk about integrated water vapor, IWV, or we call it total column water vapor. That's the amount of water vapor above the station. So wherever you have your antenna, and then throughout the atmosphere, we have the total column water vapor. That is synonym to precipitable water, PW, or the precipitable water vapor, PWV. These are all the same names for the same thing that we are measuring. They just have slightly different units, and these units are interchangeable because 1 kilogram per square meter of water vapor corresponds to 1 millimeter of precipitable water. So that's the link that we have, so we can know how much water vapor is there per area, and we can convert this to the amount of water that would come out if it would rain. So that's essentially if you have the rainfall being triggered. So these are the units that are relevant for our purpose. And I'm going through this a little quicker because I provide some more detail, and I just wanted to let you know that there are different components of the delay that we are looking at. One is a seasonal component. We call this also the dry component, or the hydrostatic delay. That is essentially the amount of water vapor that is there going through the season. You know that every time or every day during the summer, during the monsoon season, you have a much higher water vapor, irrespective if it's rains or not, right? It feels humid during the monsoon season. So that is, and in the winter season, it's the opposite, right? Right now, or months ago, it's much more dry. So that's a seasonal signal that is what we usually refer to the dry component. And then there is a component that is related to a storm that we have. So when we have a storm moving through, it can be a mesoscale convective system. It can also be just a small scale convective system. You bring in water vapor, maybe for 5-6 hours, then the storm is gone. And that is something that we call the wet delay. That is that strong change in moisture that is there maybe only for a few hours or maybe a few days, depending on how big the storm is. And that's exactly what we are after. We are interested in understanding how are those hour-to-hour changes, because that's what causing, what can be the cause of many of the big floods that we have. So I just talked about the hydrostatic delay, or also the dry delay. It's mostly caused by the dry gases, so nitrogen and oxygen, and that is changing throughout the season. It's the largest part of the signal. So 90% of the delay is made up by seasonal changes, by the movement of seasonal air masses. The good thing about this large signal is that it's very stable and predictable. So we know how it changes throughout the season, and we can model it. I'm not going into details here, but I'm just letting you know that they are very simple terms. It looks complicated, but it's really only a very simple approximation of the dry delay based on the pressure, the height of the station, and the latitude of the station. So essentially, when you know the pressure of that day, you know how much water vapor is in there. So that's something that we can use to correct for the dry component. This is an example of what the total delay looks like. That's from a climate model, and that tells you the delay in meters, this now in meters. And what we see is that the Himalaya, the Andes, they have a low delay of only 1.5 meters, and that's mostly because they are high up in the atmosphere, meaning the column is shorter, right? You are missing that extra 4 or 5 kilometers if you're 5 kilometers up. So you have a much lower amount of delay, whereas then there are some places where you have quite high delay, up to 2.5 meters, and the highest delay is usually over the ocean. So this is where you store most of the moisture, because it's also the lowest, right? You have most of water column above you. Just a quick note that there's in the community, people look at reanalysis data. ERA 5 is a very commonly used climate model data set. This is a precipitable water vapor against measured water vapor. This is our GNSS water vapor. And it generally shows you a very, very good correlation. This is a global compilation. So this is a good correlation. There are, of course, some outliers, and these are then the interesting parts why they're outliers, but we are not talking about this, now. So, just to wrap this up, I wanted to let you know that by using satellites and modern satellite system, we have up to 30 or 50 satellites in the air. We can essentially look through the atmosphere, and we can also turn the atmosphere into little cubes and then get the water vapor amount for each of those cubes. Those cubes are being called voxels, and that's exactly what you have in Minecraft, if you happen to be familiar with the Minecraft voxels, right? So you can envision that you have a block space landscape where you can then get the water vapor amount for each of those cubes. Now, with that little bit of background, let's move to our stations that we have set up. These are the stations that the three of us set up 3 years ago now. 3 years ago. This is the one in the lower Triguli. We call it NPA1. That's at roughly 500 meters elevation. And you see here our antenna. It's permanently mounted on the property of a hydropower company that we work with. And we have this part here is our meteorological sensor that measures temperature, pressure, relative humidity. And here the data gets stored. So when we look at this, this is, by the way, where we set it up. We set it up on a little tower, so it's a little higher. This little plot here just shows the average sky view, because there are other mountains around it. You know, it's within a valley, so we have mountains around it. This is the sky view, meaning this is looking north, east, south, west. And this line indicates how much we can see of the sky. And essentially you can envision that when you're standing on an open part, the horizon is visible all around. So this, you would have a 0-degree angle. If you have to look up 30 degrees to see the sky, because there's mountain in between you, you would go up to 30 degrees. So you can only see, or the station is only to measure water vapor in the direction where it can see the sky. If you have a mountain or a building in between, you cannot see that. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when we talk about integrated water vapor, it's not the entire sky above you, only the sky that you can see in that sense. When we move up the valley, we have set up a second station about 350 meters higher. This is our NPA2 station that we set up in one of the dam sites that, by the way, got also flooded during the big flash flood, the glacial lake outburst flood in July. This is in a more dense valley. So we see that the western side is pretty much blocked out because this is in the bottom of a valley and there's a steep mountain range on the western side, so we can't see that, and that's what is shown here on the sky view. When we move further up, this is at 1700 meters. The third station here is set up on a nice rooftop where we have pretty clear view of the sky, and that station is providing us with very valuable data. So those stations and the data that we produce allow us to look at water vapor content and, for example, look at incoming storms. So when you have a big convective system coming in, the water vapor content goes up, and when it rains out, the water vapor content goes down. That's just the way how the cycle during the monsoon season works. Now, as I said, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction, and I would like to move on to some exercises so that you get to do some things. The way we have planned that is that we are going to use pre-processed data. So the processing of this water vapor data would require a good software setup that we are currently not going to install here, but we are going to look at time series that other people have produced. And we are going to use a time series produced by the Nevada Geodetic Laboratory, NGL, and we are going to use the KUGE station. Anybody have an idea of where the KUGE station is located at? It's about 100 meters from here. It's that station that is down there. It's that station here on campus that the UNESCO installed a couple of years ago, and it is one of the few stations that produce live data within Nepal. So it's a very important point for water vapor sensing, and I'm certain you all walk by there, right? It's that big tripod that is standing over there that is producing data. It mostly is working continuously, but then off and on there are power outages or other problems. So we don't have a perfectly continuous time series, but almost perfectly continuous. So these data can be downloaded from the UNESCO website. This is a link that brings you directly to that website. We are not going to download the Rhinex data, that's the raw data. We are going to download the pre-processed data. And if you are interested in processing your own data to derive water vapor contents, there is a nice online service from the Canadian government where you can upload a Rhinex file. So let's say you have your own GPS station installed somewhere and you would like to obtain the water vapor content, you can upload that data to that website, and maybe 2 minutes later you get the results of the water vapor content. The only drawback with that service is you can do a maximum of 6 days, which means that when you have a year of time series, you need to upload quite a few files, but you can also upload it through a Python API, so that you can upload it automatically. You don't need to manually do that. Again, if you want to do it locally, the processing, it requires a detailed setup, such as the Bernese software or the Gamut software that does this for you. I'm mostly using Gamut, but that would require quite a bit of additional installation, and we are not going through that here. Okay. What's next is that you are please going to go to the GitHub and open up the Jupyter Lab, which is called GNSS First Steps. Then it totally lay KUGE, that's the station here, from NGL. So what we are going to do in the next hour or so is I'm going to walk you through an analysis of water vapor, real slow. And I'm trying to explain you some things of how you do this with Python and particularly how you use the pandas package, which is a great tool for time series analysis. So it will be real slow, and just follow along either on the screen here or you see it on your Jupyter Lab that you have open locally. So what I've done is I have on that GitHub directory, we have that result from 2024 from the station, so the analysis that has been done by the Nevada Geodetic Laboratory. It's stored as a zip file, and if you unzip this, it has one separate file for each day. So every day has its own file, and that file we are going to load in because that file contains the water vapor amount every 5 minutes. So it's a very, very high resolution file that gives you essentially the amount of water vapor that is above that station. And if we look at a file, this is an example, I just choose the 333rd day of 2024. And you see that the file is set up in a way that you have the station name, you have the date. The date is given in the year, day, and then the number of seconds. That's an epoch. That's the way how you store data in the GNSS world. Then you have the total delay, the uncertainty underscore the sigma, the one sigma uncertainty. You have the wet delay, the uncertainty, and you have the water vapor. We are only interested in the water vapor amount for our analysis now. We just ignore all the other columns. We are just going to use the water vapor column. By the way, you could also load this into Excel. So for those of you who are familiar with Excel, you could open up that file in Excel as well. But it becomes a little complicated opening up 365 files, one for every day, in Excel and doing an analysis. So therefore, why we try to automatize it. I explained what those columns mean in detail here. And we are now going to open up the first file. And I'm going to explain you how we do this. And we are going to do this by importing pandas. So in the first cell, so the way a Jupyter Lab, I'm sorry, I should have explained how a Jupyter Lab is set up. In this top cell is a text cell, and then those cells that have this different background, they are code cells. And those cells we can run. So we can run them, or we can run the commands in there, and we can do that by selecting the cell. It's being selected because we have the blue bar here, and we just push that play button. So on this cell now, if I'm pushing the play button, I'm running the first cell, and when it's running, then you see the star. You see a star, and when it's done, you see it's it gives you the number, and that's the number of commands that we have done. This is the first command, therefore it has a 1 here. If I run this again, if I go in here and I run it again, it will have the number 2 because we have run now the second command, okay? So as long as something is running, you see a star. I have done this in a way that we are using a Unix system to unzip and create the directories, so I can directly run the commands in Jupyter Lab. If you don't have a Unix system, then you may need to manually unzip it in the Windows Explorer. So you can do a right mouse click and unzip it. So for example, I am now unzipping that file from 2024, and we have, every single day has a separate file that we now have compressed. When the output is very, very long, Jupyter Lab truncates it, right? So you see the output would be much longer. You can scroll in this window. Oops, you can scroll up and down in this window, but it's it remains in that window, and you can just move to the next cell. So on the next cell, what is always useful when you want to go through a larger data set is try one example file. And we are just picking out one file, and that is our day 333. And we are going to open up that file with the pandas read CSV. CSV stands for comma separated value. So this is essentially an Excel format. So the CSV can read in our file. And the nice thing about pandas is that it can read automatically the compressed format. So we don't need to uncompress this format because pandas have a reader for GZ, as a gzipped format, or any other zipped format. So that's the nice part about pandas. And what we need to tell pandas when it reads this file is how many rows at the beginning needs to be skipped. When you open up this file, usually every well-documented file has a file description, the header in the file. And we need to skip through that. So the first 54 rows are the description of the file. What is each variable, what's the unit, what's the station location, and so on. We don't need that for our time series analysis, so we can just skip through it. And at the very end, we also have a couple of lines that tell that the file is ending, and we need to skip those things too, because they are not part of the time series. So the skip footer means that the last two lines and the first 54 lines are being skipped off that file. We are only extracting the time series data. That goes pretty quick. If I'm running this cell, we now have an output of our file. So we have the site, the date, and then all of the different columns that we talked about. We are not interested in those intermediate products. We are only interested in extracting our site, the time, and the water vapor amount. And what we can do, we can tell pandas to just use specific columns. So here is the part of the command that we are relying on. So we say we only use the first, the second, and the 10th columns. So the thing to keep in mind is that in the Python world, you start counting at 0. So the first value is not the first value, but the 0th value. So when we count the numbers of columns that we would like to load in, then this is 0, or I can say this is 0, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right? So we want column 0, column 1, and column 9, and everything else we can ignore. So therefore, we are using the use column 0, 1, 9, and we give it as a list. And that then reads only those parts of the file. So we have automatically removed the columns that we don't want to. You know, if you would do this in Excel, you would need to go right mouse click, delete column or something like that, right? And that's always a lot of extra steps that you need to do. So we have loaded in those 3 columns, and now we want to load it in and store it in a data frame, meaning that we want to store it in a format that pandas can work with. So we are loading in. I use the _df for data frame, and that's the format that pandas likes to store their data in. It can store all types of data. It can store time data. It can store ASCII data. It can store integer numbers, floating numbers, anything you would like to store. And I'm using the command .head here, which means give me just the first 5 data points of this. So I'm just looking at the head of the file. And there's the equivalent of tail, if I would write tail, it would give me the last 5 lines. And you see then the last 5 lines are the end of the day in seconds. So this is just a quick way to see what the data looks like and if you have properly imported it. So so far so good. Everybody able to follow along, bringing in the data. Now the next.
If not, put your hand up and I will come around and we can look at these things. Yeah, I'm coming.
So one tricky thing with importing data into a machine-readable format is that every agency has their own time format and their own weird way of storing data. And here in the NGL, the Nevada Geodetic Laboratory, you store the time in the really awkward format, right? It would be nice if it would be 2024 and then a dash and then maybe the 9th of December and then a dash again and then the time. That's not the way it is. It's being stored as the year 24, the day of the year, 333 is the day of the year, and then the numbers of seconds. So we need to write a little code that translates those 3 numbers into a real date, because we want pandas to be able to read that date. And what we are going to do is we are going to take that column called epoch, and we are going to split this string. This is a string, so it's stored as an ASCII string. We are going to split that string on the colons. So we have a first cell is a year, a second cell is our day of the year, and the third cell is our second. So this is our first step in translating that column into a date. So I'm calling this split columns. So we have a first column is the year, the second column is the day of the year, and the third column is the second. And now we can put them back together. We can put them back together by storing the first column as the year, the second column as the day of the year, so DOY stands for day of the year, and then we store the seconds. And we can put this together. We can essentially build up our date again. We have a date based on the year, on the day of the year, and on the second. And Pandas is very, very flexible with this, so we can just bring in our year, time of the year, day of the year, and seconds, and we end up getting a date time format. So we get a format that can be understood by any NumPy Pandas environment that works with dates. So essentially we have to translate that weird epoch date with the 24, 333, and then the seconds into a machine-readable format. And the machine-readable format is called a datetime object. That is just the object that you use in Python to store your data. So now you see that our data frame contains the first 3 columns that we had before, and now we have the new columns, year and day of the year, and the datetime format. And the datetime format is what we are mostly interested in. So this is the first 5 rows of the column, and if we show the last 5 rows of the column,
I think you have to slow down just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is there anything you would like me to repeat or go through again? Is there, again, are there questions about specific? I know that some of you have been working with Pandas or Python. Are there specific questions how you do things? Please feel free to ask them. We can take a short break. So now we have our time series data. We have a new object, which is the datetime format, which is essentially the time of the measurement. And the next thing we are going to do is because we deal with international data. You may have a station here in Nepal, another one in India, and then maybe someone somewhere else. We need to set the proper time zone. And all GNSS data are always in UTC, or in London time. That is the global standard, so, or the Greenwich time, whatever you want to call it. UTC is the time zone. So what we are going to do is we are going to set our date time format, and we set it to the correct time zone. So we are setting the time zone to UTC. So now when we look at our date time format, we know that it's a UTC time, and then we can convert it to any time zone we want, to the Nepali time, to the Indian time, whatever we would like to. We are going to do this, right? So that's the purpose of it. The next step is, so we have this column date time, and now we need to tell pandas our date time column is our most important index. So we want to sort our data by the date. So we want to, the first date comes before the second date, and so on. So we need to set the index, and that's what we are doing here. We are setting the index. So the index tells pandas that we can, for example, sort it by that index. And we are going to replace that same data frame, and we are going to look at it. So when we look at the first couple of the 5 rows again, we now see the date time is here on the left, and you see that we now have that weird +00 behind the time, and that just means that's the time zone. So this is that now we have identified or we have told pandas to use UTC time, and if we would have a different time zone, for example, for Nepal, this would be what? How many hours are we off London?
5:45.
5:45, exactly. So we would have a +5:45 if this would be Nepali time. So that's how you store the associated time zone. And okay, now we have the date and we have the water vapor, and we can make our first very simple plot. There are different ways of doing this with pandas. We can get much more involved and dive in this, but we are going to use plot capabilities of pandas, and what we are going to do is we want to plot one column. We want to plot the column water vapor. I moved this out already. Let me see here. So we have the column water vapor, and we can select this column. So we select the data frame and the name of the column, and we just say plot, and we give it a title. So I'm giving the station name, water vapor from 2024 on day 333. I'm adding an X label, and I'm adding a Y label. So this water vapor comes in millimeter, in units of millimeters. And we can plot this, and this takes a second because there are many things to plot, but here is our first time series of water vapor for the day 333. This is now in UTM or UTC time, and we see that at 0 or at night we have a low water vapor concentration, then it ramps up, and then it goes down again. So in that variability, for example, may mean that here has occurred a rainout event. So there was rain, and therefore the water vapor concentration dropped. So this is a very typical thing that we observe. It can also mean that the cloud with high water vapor amounts has passed through the station. So both options are doable. That's why you often need multiple stations to say which one is what. So, but this is an example of a single day. And just to show you the application of different time zones, so I always find it difficult to work in UTC time when I'm in South America or in Nepal, for example, because you have a diurnal, you have a daily cycle, and that depends on usually in the early afternoon you have the highest solar energy, and that's often a point that drives a lot of atmospheric motion. So it's always nice to move it into a local time frame. And we can move it to a Kathmandu time by setting a local time zone and by changing the timestamp from the UTC to, for example, the local timestamp. And that step would allow you to, now we have plus 545. And so it means that we have converted our time series into Kathmandu time. And if we now replot it, we have different times, and now you can associate it with the times that we have here locally. So we have fairly low water vapor amounts until noon, and then the water vapor amounts go up, which is pretty common because at noon you have high solar energy coming, you have more convective processes occurring, so I'm not surprised to see that signal occurring in the early afternoon here. So this is often helpful to change it to the local time zone. Okay, but that's only a single day, right? And we said that we have an entire year of data. So in the next step, we are going to load in all files from one directory. So we are going to load in every single day because we also have unzipped, right? We have unzipped every single day. We just did a test case with a single day to understand how the data is being stored and how we deal with it. And now we are going to create a file list using every file in that folder. And we are using the glob module. It's a globber module. It means we are going to grab all the names that start with a specific sequence. For example, every file that starts with KUGE is being added to the file list. And the Python module glob allows us to do this. So when we are doing this, we can then, this is taking a second. I hope that the internet connection is still. Now that we have used the glob module, we can get all the file names. And what I'm doing here is I'm sorting the file names by name. It's always nice to sort the file name by, day 0 to day 364. And here I'm showing only the first 10 file names. I just want to make sure that this has been done correctly. So I'm showing the first 10 files of that file list. And in the next cell, I am going to use a for loop. I'm going to use a for loop to read in every file. And that's a common thing that you do when you have a list of files. You can iterate through every file and read it in. And then we are just appending it to a longer list. So we make an empty list so that all files equals the square brackets creates an empty list. And we are going to add every file to that empty list in the for loop iteration. So I'm going through every file name in the file list. I'm doing the same read command that we tested up above there, right? So that's why we worked only with a single date, because we wanted to test the read command. Now we know what we need to do. We can apply it to every file because every file is the same. We can append the files, and then we can combine the files, and the concatenate, the concat command allows us to combine all of the files, and then we are looking at the combined file list. So let's do this. This will take a second because now we are reading in every file. But it's already done. It goes pretty quick. Imagine that you would need to open up every file in Excel, load it in, and copy and paste those rows, it would take a lot of time. So this is what Pandas or Python is very useful for, automatizing those tasks. It's very, very powerful. And if you want to work with time series data, then I strongly suggest that you end up diving in there. Okay, so now we have gone through all of the files, and now we have loaded in all files, but all files come in that weird date format, right? They have still that weird epoch date format with the year, the day of the year, and then the seconds. So we need to apply that same command that we had before. We are splitting that column, and we are adding it back together. So this is the same that we did before, but now we are doing it for all files. And I'm also converting it right away to the Kathmandu time, because it's easier to work with the local time, because the convective processes are driven by the local solar conditions and not what's happening in London. And so that's why I'm changing it right away to the Kathmandu time. And now we can make a simple plot. Now we have brought this all in. We can make a simple plot of the water vapor amount for the KUGE station here throughout a full year. So we start in January and we go to December 2024, so it's a full year. And what you see here is a very interesting water vapor cycle. So in the winter months, we have low water vapor events, low water vapor amounts, and then we have specific events in here. So whenever this goes up, we know that these are the occasional rainstorm that comes through. You know, it doesn't happen often, but off and on in February or March, you may have a little rainstorm that shows up exactly here. And then we have the monsoon coming, right? In May, the water vapor goes up. Essentially, the baseline is going up, and that is where the monsoon is coming in. So you have much more humidity in the air. And those peaks that are in here are the individual events of the big rainfall storms, the monsoonal convective events that you have. And then in September or in the fall, you have the decreasing amounts again. And then by November, you hit the low ends of this. So this is the annual cycle, if you want, of the water vapor contents. And what we are, for example, doing as research analysis, we are looking at those individual events. We are looking at how strong are those convective events above the baseline, above the current level. And one thing that we, for example, notice specifically for Nepal is that the relative amount of water vapor, the event-based amount in the winter is much stronger than in the summer. Of course, the total amount of water vapor amount in the summer is higher because we have the monsoon season, but when the air is already saturated and you are adding a little bit of moisture, you get a moderate rainstorm. But compared to the base level, those rainstorms in the winter are much, much stronger. So these are stronger events, if you want to call them. So this is already skipping ahead a few steps. I'm just letting you know what you often do with these time series, that you're interested in understanding how strong is an event and what caused these strong events. Okay, this is a single year. And in the remaining time, let's just do this analysis for all of the years. And before we do that, I just wanted to show you that now that we have gone through automatizing the data ingestion, we can save it to a CSV file. We can generate a new comma-separated value file that only contains time and water vapor. And that's a file that you can open in Excel, for example, or any other software that you would like to use. You can also save it directly to an Excel format, but it's often nicer to work with a CSV because it's an ASCII format and can be read by every software. Whereas if you save it to Excel, then only Excel people can read it. And in in the community of big data, not many people use Excel because it's just too cumbersome. So that's why an ASCII format is nice. And you could also add a .gzip at the end, and the file would be automatically compressed. Then you would have a compressed ASCII file. So that allows you to write this file. It's a one-line command. If we look at this, now we have created a 3 megabyte file, and that 3 megabyte file would look like this. The top headers, they look like this. You have the column names, date, time, and water vapor, and you have the time. This is now the Kathmandu time here, and you have the water vapor amount stored in the second column. So this is now you will have a date format that you can bring into a different software suite if you would like to do this. Okay, let's move ahead and let's bring in all of the other data. And we are bringing in all of the other data by creating a long file list. We are creating a file list with the 2024 data, with the 2025 data, and with the 26 data. So the processing from the NGL usually goes to 1 week before the present time. So NGL, the Nevada Geodetic Laboratory, has an automatized processing. It needs to wait for the precise orbits to come in from the GNSS satellite, and that usually takes 5 days, more or less. So usually you have the most recent data available minus 1 week of the current day. So I think we created this yesterday. So I have the data for 1 week ago, until 1 week ago, more or less. So that's a time constraint that you have. If you would like to have it in near real time, then you would need to process it yourself. But again, that's something that we can talk about some other time. So what we are doing here is we are creating a list. We're adding a list. We're adding a list with the 2024 data, with the 2025 data, and with the 2026 data. We are sorting this list, and we are going to plot the first 10 days and the last 10 days. I just want to make sure that we read in the right things. And
You have to extract.
yeah, exactly. And what the reason why I'm doing this is because I then realized, hey, I have not unzipped my 2025 and 2026 data. So I need to go in here and create a directory. I'm going to call it 2025. So now we have unzipped everything, and the whole purpose of showing the first 10 files and the last 10 files is to make sure that you have done this correctly, because otherwise I would have just have had the 2024 data. So that's always good to have that little step in here. And now what we are doing is now we are doing the same for loop as before, and we are going through every file in that list. We are reading it in, we are taping it all together with a concat command. We are converting the time data, and we are converting the time. Actually, we converted then to the Kathmandu time again. We are running this. This will take a second because now we are loading 2 years and 2 months of data. It's already done, and we now have our time series from 2020. It starts actually on January 9th of 2024, and if we look at the end of the data, the way we do this is with a tail command. So we look at the last 5 rows. Our data ends on the 7th of February, so a couple of weeks ago. Maybe if we download data today, it would be a few more days, but we have essentially days up until 2 weeks ago. And if we make a plot, we now have two monsoon seasons in here, and I just wanted to briefly talk about this a little. So we have the 2024 monsoon season. This is the 2025 monsoon season. And what we see here is that there, in both years, in 2024, in October, mid-end of October has been a rainstorm. You see that peak coming in. And the same happened in October last year, where there was a very, very strong extreme storm that brought in a lot of moisture here into this area. So those are being picked up here as a, this peak here is very, very pronounced. So this is something that would tell you that this has been a big rainstorm event. And just to wrap things up, and the remaining part, we just end up saving this because we now have 3 years or 2.5 years of data, 2024, 2025, on the first 2 months of 2026. We are storing it as a gzip, as a compressed file format, so that we have a smaller file. And that's something that you can pass on and send out to colleagues, or you do further analysis with it. Or sometimes you just would like to save this file and come back later and continue your analysis. So this is one way of saving this to a CSV file. And when we end up doing this, we have a new file created that is fairly short, compressed, and that contains KUGE data. Okay, that was the first couple of steps, bringing in the local station data and doing a little bit of time series analysis. If there is interest, we have a much more detailed notebook prepared that does an event analysis, but I'm not certain if this is something that we are going in to do, because I think now is a lunch break, if I'm not mistaken, at 12, right? And then when we come back, we are going to look at a couple of other things. But if there is an interest of looking at individual events and doing a little more time series analysis, please let us know if we could accommodate this. Otherwise, we have something else planned in the afternoon. And maybe before we conclude for today, are there any questions or any things that we should reiterate or discuss?